So Visual Natures, the Politics and Culture of Environmentalism in the 21st and 20th Century is part of a composite programming that we began at the museum more or less 3 years ago. The first instantiation of which was a large-scale data-driven and interactive installation titled Earth-Bits Sensing the Planetary. These two moments were part of a wider program framework that we dubbed MAAT Explorations that intended to attempt to bring into the museum topics, discussions and conversations from various scholarly and practice-oriented perspectives around the environmental crisis. Visual Natures, it's a second part of a project and a research-based initiative which we in fact co-developed with a variety of different practitioners, of academicians, of activists, of artists and institutions. This research project, dubbed Visual Natures, is in fact the product of a longer-term programming that was fed by public initiative, educational projects and laboratories that in fact began with Earth-Bits. So in this installation, we have collated an historical research that covers from roughly the 1950s until nowadays, and within the span of time, it endeavors to look at forms of political, cultural, and collective agency through which we as humans have made efforts to deal with transforming and expanding notions of what environmental practice really means, and so more deeply with notions informed by philosophical, biological, economic perspectives of what nature really is. Due to the encyclopedic character of the topic, we have decided to establish a sort of curatorial perspective through which audiences are introduced through core concepts, core tenets that concern the history of environmentalism through three key moments. So they do follow a chronological perspective from the late 50s, 1950s until nowadays, and they introduced sort of key concepts that were on a side informing the way we as a collective and human community were facing the ostensible and undeniable depletion that we were witnessing throughout the world. So the content of the research have been collected through 4 key areas of analysis. So we have brought together facts from art and cultural history intended as key artistic movements, events, organizations, or in fact works and projects. The second is we looked into transforming political scenario, and so governmental actions, intergovernmental sections that came to regulate and govern the way in which we humans deal with the environment. And then the last is science and technology. So how throughout innovation and studies in climate science we have basically brought knowledge about the anthropogenic impact onto environmental transformation. In order to deliver this content, we have continued our collaboration with the Milan-based studio ... and we commissioned the spatial design instead to Carla Joaçaba, a Brazilian architect. So the installation is literally shaped as a tribunal, as an assembly, the meaning that we are used to whenever gatherings of people are assembled. And this resonance, this echo between this form of deliberation around this collective future, which has nature and climate at its center, it's really physically reproduced in here. So audiences can sit around this structure and they can individually access the content of the research through individual screens that contain in fact then the work that's been developed by the studio ... So the designers, programmers and coders from the studio essentially devised a custom-made framework, a web framework through which contents can be browsed both chronologically and across these 4 main sectors of analysis. It's a very intuitive framework through which essentially both causal and historical connections can be drawn by moving chronologically across these main areas of analysis. So the idea is that the installation is both a collection of data and of information, but it's also a way to open up the museum and to open up what the museum can do around these core and critical topics throughout then a variety of other activities, including educational and public programming that of course are connected to this research. And it's also to suggest the idea that certainly whatever we are trying to bring a certain sense of familiarity to with this complex web of facts, of data and events that preceded us, is really made to inspire our publics to learn more of what and how brought us here where we are nowadays, and to potentially empower them to devise a better understanding of how they and we can contribute to solve the causes.